Hello and welcome. My name is Isaac. I am third generation owner of Rental Equipment and founder of Rental Business Beacon, the podcast where we guide equipment rental companies and ignite local success. Well, as a little bit of a get to know me, I'm the youngest of four. I have three older sisters. Fortunately, none of them had any interest in the business, so it made that transition of powers from my father to me easy. We didn't have to figure out who was going to take over what roles within the company. It just all came down on me. So it just made things simple and kind of pain-free on that front. For education, I went to the same school from kindergarten through graduation, where I attended St. Joseph Christian here in St. Joe. I graduated in 2013. After graduation, I went down south to Kansas City, where I attended the University of Missouri, Kansas City, UMKC, Go Roos. I attended the block school there, where I achieved my bachelor's in business administration. I was in the block school there, really great education. I loved the school. Something fun that I was doing during my schooling there was, while living in the dorms even, I ran a small hustle out of my dorm where there was an eBay seller. They sold all these blemished TVs that either had a scratch on the frame, maybe there was an LED that was dead, like stuff that's like low key, not that big a deal. So I was able to get them at a pretty steep discount because people just didn't want to bid on something that had a blemish, but they were still perfectly fine. I advertised it as such when I bought them. I just resold them on Craigslist. So I had some supplemental income there. I had a lot of fun, running my own, business of sorts out of my dorm. So my dorm mate, he had to put up with that. A bunch of random people come through the dorm, which, matter of fact, that dorm mate is now one of my best friends. We play games together. We play PC games, semi-regular with each other at night. But at any rate, one big memory I have from it was I had this big 80-inch TV that I was bidding on. I thought, man, I don't know if I should get this because then I have to store this or deal with the front desk when it gets delivered. But I thought, if the price is right, whatever, I'll just go for it. So lo and behold, I end up winning the bid on it. I thought, okay, well, shoot, here we go. So I go ahead, before it even ships out, I start advertising it on Facebook, on Craigslist, trying to push this thing. And then I have a buyer lined up before it even arrives. So it arrives. It's this big 80-inch TV, which, for me at the time, that was a big TV. Came this big, makeshift wooden crate in the box and everything. The front desk gave me this look of what's going on. I'm just hey, there's my TV. Cool. How's this going to fit in your small little dorm? I pushed it up to my dorm, unbox it, check it out. Everything's kosher. And then I let the buyer know, who I actually had lined up to come that same day. Once I checked it out, they showed up same day. So literally taking it to my room, unboxing it. And then within a couple hours, I had a buyer show up, pick it up and take it off our hands. So I thought that was a lot of fun and just an experience that I kind of remember from back then. So with that, I think I apply some the principles or my approaches from then to now of what am I going to do? I'm just going to go for it. I'm just going to pursue something that I feel like it's going to work out. And if I throw myself into it, I'm just going to make it work. And I feel like I apply some of that even today in my day-to-day business practice. So will it work out? Let's find out. Well, now for backstory on rental equipment. It was founded in 1956, not by my grandpa. Like I said, I'm a third generation owner. It existed, but all they had was a camper, a few lawnmowers, some small lawn tools and so forth. And then they had those vibrating workout machines with the belts and so forth, those little hoaxes. They used to have those, as a matter of fact. So that's where they started. My grandpa, he worked at a advertising agency. He saw potential in this industry, talked to my grandma, said, hey, I want to buy this business and go for it. She had his back. So it's awesome for her for having her husband's back like that. He bought it. He grew it pretty exponentially, and he did what it took to run a business and build a business. He was taking phone calls at night, after hours, working with customers, listening to customers, which for everyone needs to be paramount. You need to be listening to your customers, what they need, any complaints that they might have. You really need to hear your guys out. Then in 1989, my dad took over. One of his biggest things that he did was our founding location. He actually moved that just down the street to a much bigger lot that had a way bigger warehouse, a way bigger shop, which was a huge move for rental because it allowed us to have more mechanics in a space, just a better environment for having the proper tools and everything that you need to work on equipment to get things fixed properly and safely. So that was massive for us. It allowed us to then also grow our inventory because we'd gotten pretty cramped where we were previously. And I worked out of that store for a little bit in my youth, but most of my time was actually spent at the move. We have 2 locations here in St. Joe. Before my dad took over, he actually managed the second location for a while before he inevitably took over and bought the company off my grandpa. Then in 2019, after he had groomed me for a couple years, that's when we signed the paperwork to begin the purchase of the business. There's going to be some time till it's paid off, but at any rate, it wasn't just given to me. I am paying it off over time. So again, that was 2019. I showed up, with this education from, school. I was relatively overconfident, but, we all are in some ways, or you should be. I think you have to be pretty confident in what you're doing in order to make it. And that's, I think, what defines those that do and don't cut it in this industry, or really just the business ownership in general. I think you have to have a real sense of confidence about what you're doing and the attitude of things will work out and you will make it happen. So in part with being overconfident, when I first took over, I realized I made some pretty bold moves that were kind of a bit much for a guy coming into it. I should have just shown up ready to just kind of let things cruise as they were so I can get, more acclimated to being a business owner and the weights and pressures that comes with that and responsibilities that come with being a business owner and expectations that come with being a business owner. Some of those moves being how heavily I was buying equipment, how aggressive I was being with spending on certain areas where it just ultimately, looking back now, probably was not fully necessary. I think a lot of my decisions come from a place of, what would Dad do? So I have a lot of respect for him. I seek his guidance on things where I'm just kind of at a loss of, hey, this is a really precarious situation. What would you do in this situation? So it's great for me that I have that resource, and for anyone that has a resource, if they're taken over or just of a business, speaking to the previous owner, or even just reaching out to other independent guys that perhaps guys in your region wouldn't be too interested, or your market wouldn't be too interested in talking to you about strategy and approaches of issues. But I also feel like a lot of guys in our industry do have that mindset of helping out the little guy and helping support the family-owned business, and because that's kind of the American dream, is the small independent operation versus like the big national corporations. But that's not to say there's anything wrong with the national corporations. It's just there's certainly a lot of pride in, you should have pride in everything you do, whether you're a business owner or just an operator at a national company. There's just a lot of pride that comes to this industry and a lot of just internal support. So that's something that's really cool about this industry, is how much internal support there is. So with being a third generation owner, I think there's a lot of pressure that comes with that in terms of the stigma that exists about the third generation of a company. They say the first generation, they start it. The second generation, they grow it. And then the third generation, they're the ones that are prone to lose it. So there's a lot of pressure and fear that's always looming in the back of my mind when I'm making like significant monetary decisions or just operation decisions that take the company a different direction from how we used to operate. But that shouldn't scare you if you are like a multi-generation owner or operator, or you have influence in your company, because each generation, the customer changes, business practices change, laws change. So you have to change. You have to respect the old ways in some ways, but you still have to have that ability to adapt. Then also just trust yourself and just be confident in your decision, because you should be the most confident in yourself. You should be your number one fan. So if you're not your number one fan and you're not confident in yourself, find ways to be confident. Find books that are going to build that confidence. And we're going to get into books in the future, which I'm excited about. Books are a big deal. They're a big part of me and my growth and how I've built myself as a business owner. With being a third generation owner, people in this industry, like the blue collar construction industry, or just homeowners too, that have been with us for decades, they know my family. I've got a big family here in St. Joe, so there's a little bit of knowledge of my family and my fear of tarnishing the name in some way with a decision or what have you, that it might just impact us in some way. But small town, I try not to let that get to me, and I think it's kind of silly in some ways. So again, you should be your biggest fan and just be confident in the decisions that you make. For me, something that I'm proud of for a big decision I made was early on, well, before I even took over, I knew something that big that needed to change was the technology that we use in-house, where we were using an old DOS system when I took over and when I was being groomed. But I knew that needed to change because we needed to modernize. We needed to have a website that integrated with our point of sale. That way customers could see our inventory, prices in real time, reserve equipment, and then allow us to communicate with them. That was an absolute venture. So for generations, we had used this old DOS system, where this DOS system, it's called Rents, doesn't exist anymore. It got bought out, but we called up the guys that would service it, and we said, hey, if we put you guys on retainer, would you guys keep servicing this software? If we then also found a few other rental operators that are using the software, would you keep servicing it? That way we can keep using it, because it's awesome. Even though it's antiquated, it was still an excellent piece of software. To some extent, I miss how it was because of the simplicities of it. It did payroll, all my accounting, inventory management. It did everything. But I took over and I started kind of shopping around. And whilst shopping around, I get a call from the guys that service it saying, hey, Isaac, you're actually the last guy that's using our software and have been for quite some time. And we're kind of ready to call it quits. So just let you know, you probably want to look for another software pretty quick. So I thought, wow, that's great. I'm actually already kind of shopping around a bit. So it was kind of serendipitous that they called right about the time that I'm looking for a new software. But what that came with was, now I had to teach myself a new software, a new accounting system, where we're using QuickBooks Online now to handle everything for payables, payroll, just your basic bookkeeping. So then I went from having the decades of experience that I could go to my father when I had an issue with the system. Now I was just completely alone in a raft out in the ocean, teaching myself how to run this new bookkeeping software for me and make sure everything lined up. Came with a lot of headaches, some loss in terms of monetary wise, just stuff that you couldn't track that you just had to write off because some things you just couldn't prove. So it was just growing pains, I think, at the end of the day, is what it was. Just kind of consider that as you're making moves that are better for the future, is just consider a growing pain. So we went through some growing pains when changing softwares. Currently, we're using Alert. We've been really happy with them. Their support is pretty good. We're happy about it. And they've been around for a long time as well. So there's something to be said about they've got tenure in the industry. So that's worth something. And then to my CPA, who I send my end of year books to, I'm sure that I caused a few gray hairs because of how the books looked for a couple of years. I recognize that they were kind of, the first year from the switch, they were in despair. Second year, it got better. And then third year, it improved significantly. So I'm really looking forward to the next fiscal year end, because I feel like I'm really, after all these years now, I really have a good grasp on it. So I don't want to overspeak, but I really think that I've got things figured out pretty decent now at today's date moving forward, where last year's they were still like some struggle where I sent it in thinking it was ready. But it was a little bit tenacious thinking they were ready. And I kind of overlooked some stuff, but I got it fixed at the end of the day and just learned from it. So again, just growing pains. But with it all, it really helps me sleep at night knowing that we're built for the future, knowing that I've taken some of the difficult tasks, got those accomplished, and now we're on a bit of a cruise control where I can kind of take a step back after all these system changes and now evaluate my numbers of utilization, income by equipment class and just equipment generally speaking, what's bringing in more, what's doing less, where can we maybe cut some overhead that's just unnecessary, because if you have more equipment, it still needs a service yearly. So there's no point in putting time into an annual service on something that gets very little volume when you can just roll that money into something just better. But again, we'll get into business strategy in future podcasts. A thing that's guiding our company is working on a sense of fairness to the customer, where we're always trying to give them the bigger benefit and be fair to them while also still maintaining a fairness for you and your own company. You need to be fair to your company, making sure you're looking out for your best interests as well. But obviously you need to prioritize the customers. But whether that's, say, a customer leaves with a piece of equipment and our cameras are just unable to see a certain angle on a machine that we know didn't have the damage when it left, but it returns the damage, we're certain that they're the ones that caused it, even though we can't prove it per se. We'll typically, land with the customer and give them the benefit of the doubt and just say, we'll just go ahead and eat this one just because at the end of the day, we can fix it. If it's not super detrimental, we'll just eat it and, have them happier at the end of it that just brings them coming back. Also with our AR guys, there's times where guys get into a really big job. They can't afford to get to their bills, caught up with me because, say that their customer is just really slow to pay them out. We work with them on just lowering the amount that they need to make payment on, or even just extending the line of credit that we give, or just extend out a little bit the terms in terms of return on making payments on their bills. We work with them. We always operate on a sense of trust until they give us a reason not to. I think that's a really good practice that you should do. For me, I've been burned plenty. I think a lot of you, if you've been in the industry long enough, or really business in general, you've probably been burned quite a few times, but I would value trust with my customer well over, the consequence of being burned. I just really value trust, and more than just the trust between me as the vendor and them as the customer. I think that there's a great level of trust internally just with our employees and how they, trust me and trust management. I think that is something that can't be overstated, the importance of having trust internally amongst all the guys. There's a few guys that actually talk about the high value that comes with trust internally. So I have a lot of confidence that we have internal trust. To kind of reinforce that, we've had a few guys that retired with us that were 50-year veterans with us. So I don't think guys stick around. I know that type of employee is probably not going to come around again, but we've got guys that have been with us, 30 years, others that have been with us, 10 years plus. So we've got guys that trust us, and, not to be corny or sound ironic, but there is a sense of family because we just really look out for each other, and it's just reciprocated amongst each other. I take care of them. They take care of us. When I say us, I mean my family and myself, and just management at the top. And I think there's something to be said about, I've had plenty of guys who, the grass is always greener. They'll take off for another job, but then after a few months, it's relatively common for them to come back saying, we did appreciate the job that we had here. So we've had a fair amount of guys come back, and it's cool because it gives me a sense of pride of, okay, we're doing something right, even though, they may have moved on, and I don't take it personally if a guy moves on. I'm happy for a guy to always grow and do something different. But it's kind of fun when a guy comes back because he sees the value in what we built and how we treat them and operate as a company, that it is different than a lot of employers out there. One thing that I do during interviews is I'll actually tell guys that, hey, life's hard enough. We've built a culture here that most guys just get along great with each other. There's a real happiness that, exists within the workplace. So we want to make sure that the guys coming in also share the value of not being difficult, being happy, easy to work with, not having a temper. That's a big deal to us. We can work with guys. You can work with guys. Don't get distraught if you have a guy that you see potential in, but he's just got this real bad attitude. I think guys can be worked with and bettered. We've seen it happen. We've got good guys with us that used to have a bit of a temper. So we're really blessed with some really good guys that we've worked with over time and built up. But that's not to say everybody can be worked with. There's guys that you're going to have to say goodbye to, and we've said goodbye to just because the attitudes just weren't great, and we parted ways, and things were okay, and it helped guys out because then that cancer of sorts was gone, and just morale and everything in the shop improved. So it's really a big thing. I think you can't overstate the value that comes with everyone being in a good attitude and having people that are on board with having good attitudes and just building that culture. When I first took over, I would say I was a little bit weaker on guys in terms of accountability and so forth. I was always kind of like with customers, giving them the bigger benefit over, the company's benefit. Don't think that your niceness is a view of weakness. In some cases, it certainly can be, but fairness isn't weakness, and being just overly nice to guys isn't a weakness. It just is what's going to set you apart as an employer. And those employees that are good and that work out, they're the ones that are going to appreciate your niceness, your willingness to bend over backwards for them. They're the ones that are going to appreciate it. And those that don't appreciate it, they're lost, they get mad, they move on. And then you just have to stress about guys that aren't appreciating the efforts that you do. So that's one thing I'd say is a big deal, is being fair to yourself, and that don't be too overly nice, because then it does cause you stress, and just understand that still being as nice as possible. But, that's not to say that niceness always wins, because some guys still move on, even though you're nicer than any other employer might have treated them. So now looking forward for the future of rental equipment, kind of going back to when I was making some pretty bold decisions early on. I was buying equipment like crazy with the intention of having fleet to roll into a new market when I inevitably open up a branch down in Kansas City. I look forward to the challenge, and I look forward to the stress that it's going to bring of opening up another branch down south. But it's something that I've been working towards, and that kind of coincides with the update of technology. I knew that I needed to have as much technology on my side supporting the move once I'm in another market, managing more locations. I need to have every bit of technology on my side that supports multiple branch operation and just alleviates as much stress as possible. So I look forward to the battle. I look forward to the stress that's going to come with the next expansion. But for me, I just look forward to it as just another growing pain where once I overcome it, I'll have a great sense of pride. And that's just something I'm really, really excited about. Looking forward in St. Joe, in this market that I'm in right now, I'm certainly not tapped out in the amount of market share that I have here. I know there's a lot more that I can still grab. So I've just got big goals to just make better inroads, relationships with the bigger contractors in town, and get in contact with their subs and so forth. So with that, there's a lot of generational contractors in town. So I think there's a lot to be said about the connection that we can have on that front of family owned, multi-generation, supporting each other. That's something that I feel like I could bring to the table, and the level of care that I know that we would bring to working with the contractor when something goes down or what have you. I know that we can answer the call when that time comes. But again, that's on me. It's something I've always had in the back of my mind, the sales aspect of getting out and pushing the brand and repping rental. So that's in the works, coming in the future, down the pipeline. But it's just all a matter of me finding the time to make that happen. Supporting my big desire to grow and just do more is to also give more. If you talk to many people around me, especially those that work with me, because they're the ones that I give to most often because I see them more often, I've got a servant's heart. I've got a giving heart where I try to give as much as I can, reasonably, without putting myself in a bad spot. So one goal is to be able to make more, so then I can also give more, donate to the community, help build the community. Just this sense of St. Joe has a really unique sense of community and self-pride in who we are. So I really want to be behind that, support that, and just reinforce that and be attractive to people outside the city, saying, oh man, the city has something special. They do so many events and so forth. And with that, to have events, we're trying to donate to things, the churches and various just city put on events will donate cost on certain areas. That way we're, saving the city areas that they can then invest more into the city, where the city need is elsewhere outside of events. So it is honest, 100% honesty. I really do enjoy giving, and the idea of making more excites me because then it allows me to then give more and just take part in that growth of the city and just helping those. And that's the beacon. That's Rental. This is us. So again, every other week, you should be expecting a podcast. Maybe if I get motivated and start putting them out once a week at some point, find the time, that'd be awesome. But check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, TikTok. Check us out on all those different platforms. Give us a follow. You just kind of keep up to date with what we've got going on. Next week, it's going to be a bit of a hybrid in terms of we're going over top 5 mistakes that happen in the rental industry, both on the contractor side or the customer side of how you can make a mistake when ordering equipment, but also on the side of the rental equipment stores, mistakes that happen on our end. So it'll be a good opportunity. I think it's going to be super valuable, mostly to the operators of rental stores, just because you're going to get insight of where the contractor or customer's thought process may be on where their mistake comes from. You may have your own solution for these issues that I'm going to bring up, like what I'm deeming are top 5 mistakes, but at least it gives you the resource of, hey, this is how this 3-generation company is handling it. And honestly, if you feel like you have a better way, I look forward to hearing about it and saying, wow, this guy had an awesome point on how he got around this issue, or this is how they deal with a customer in this situation. I think iron sharpens iron. So any input that, again, that this community brings of working with each other, building each other up is super valuable and what makes it super fun to be a part of. So for now, signing off. We'll see you guys on the next one.